Hi everyone, my name is Poppy Love Oldham and I'm an artist at Rural Arts. This month we have a craft box which is based around polymer clay jewellery. I'm going to be helping you to show you the different steps that you can take to make your jewellery boxes this month. The brilliant thing about polymer clay is that you don't need anything too specialised or fancy or expensive in order to make your jewellery. What I would probably recommend having in addition to your craft pack is some paper, some colouring in pencils if possible, and if not possible just a simple pencil would be brilliant. I would also have some tin foil, a rolling pin if you don't get one with your pack, and also some baking parchment paper too. I think the most trickiest bit is knowing where you're going to start. So that's why I would always go in with a little bit of a plan. So what I would do is start thinking about the colours that you're drawn to. It could be certain motifs and patterns that you always tend to wear or draw or use. Like if you think about whether you like different sorts of flowers, what you are kind of drawn to within nature. Is it certain birds, different sorts of landscapes? Is it bumblebees? Is it something quite abstract instead? This is your starting point. So sketch all these ideas on a piece of paper and go in with a little bit of a plan. If you're stuck for visuals, take a look up on Pinterest, do a quick Google search, go on Instagram. It could be that you look in a magazine for patterns and colours that look lovely together. If you really are a good planner, then you could visit the library and take a look at the art and fashion books there. Or maybe it's just a matter of opening up your wardrobe and seeing what kind of colours that you always wear. Maybe it could be looking through and having a think about what shapes and patterns that you love wearing, and you can make jewellery that complements your outfits. I also like to have a look at certain kind of pattern books. So I go onto my bookshelf and I have a flick through. Sources of inspiration can be found in loads of different places. It could be different flowers, it could be arrangements that you have within your own home, it could be a cushion that you really love. Like for example, I love that stained glass window, and I think the colours within there, how they've used the different tones of green and blue, would be really beautiful. And I think against this yellow, it's really gorgeous. I also thought this kind of pattern and knitting, crochet, embroidery book would be really helpful. So I'm having a look at different patterns, cushions, so I love those flowers. I think they would be really gorgeous. And certain things like this, it could be taking a certain aspect of that and thinking, oh well, the flowers or the daisies within that and the circles would be really great as some jewellery. A fish. So what I would do, once you've got all those kind of ideas together, what I would do is a quick sketch. Taking the best bits of what you've really enjoyed about looking through those magazines or books or internet search, etc. Start thinking about how they're going to be put together, whether it's going to be a stud or whether it be a hanging sort of earring. Maybe it might be better as a little jewellery in terms of a necklace. it might be better in that aspect. So do start thinking about the best way that that sketch might work. You might be thinking, what is polymer clay? It's a type of modelling clay that is made from vinyl plastic because it stays soft until it's baked. The great thing is that you can bake it at home in a regular oven, and you can also store the clay airtight to make it another day. You can blend it together to create custom colours. You can sculpt it, impress it with lots of different textures. You could also sand, polish it or paint it afterwards too. So how do you get ready to start working with it? What I would do is prepare your workspace. Polymer clay is generally really safe, but it can stain or damage some surfaces. So protect your table by working on top of baking parchment paper, a metal baking sheet or a piece of glass. If you don't have any of these, what I would do is just tape down some paper, but make sure that your surface is clean, as should be your tools. You don't want any dust or anything else coming into your clay. You want to condition your clay. So conditioning is the process of kneading the clay so it becomes more flexible and easier to shape. Knead it in your hands until it's soft. To test if it's ready, what you would do is roll it out into a coil. So a coil is a sausage shape. You should be able to bend it whilst it's in this coil shape without seeing any cracks. As with all types of clay, what you don't want to do is trap air bubbles in your clay. And this can happen when you're folding it. If you do see an air bubble occur, what you want to do is pop it with a needle or a knife. A way that I like really conditioning the clay is I like flattening it as much as possible and folding it in half. And then flattening it once more. Kind of like how you would work pastry. I find this really helps to soften it quite quickly. As you can see, I'm starting to work with smaller balls. I find this is helping me knead it much quicker. Just a tip as well. So you'll start to notice that you'll get pigment on your hands, particularly with the darker colours. Do wash your hands in between kneading the different pigments, otherwise those pigments will go into the lighter colours. So for example, this red one, if I was to start kneading that pink polymer clay, what would happen is pigments from the red will go into the pink. So just be wary of that and wash your hands in between. Do remember, if you have primary colours, you can make other colours with them. So the primary colours of red, blue and yellow, you can also mix together to make purple, green and also orange. You would make, if you wanted to make purple, you would mix together yellow and red. So I'm going to take a little bit of the blue that I have. Again, look, I've got pigment on my hand. And I'm going to pull a bit of the red off. And I'm going to knead those together. It's starting to blend together and make a deep purple. I would like to add a bit more purple, make it a little bit lighter, so I'm going to add a little bit more red to it. If you are mixing colours together, remember just to take small bits off. It's best to mix small bits at a time in case you don't like the colour that you mix. If you end up mixing too many colours together, it can end up quite muddy. And I don't know if you ever remember Play-Doh and all the colours ended up brown. So just bear that in mind when you're mixing your colours. Just mix to small little bits together at a time. Do have fun with it though. So take different bits of clay together and start blending them to see what you think. They will be fully mixed together when you can no longer see the streaks. But sometimes actually leaving the streaks in can be quite effective too. Remember what I said about testing whether they are ready. So what I would like you to do is take one and we're going to roll it into a coil. So this is quite a small piece, and what you should be able to do is bend it without seeing any cracks, and that's when you know it's ready. I'm going to work with quite small pieces at a time. As what I would like to do is just to show you how I would go about making a rainbow. So with those three, I'm going to gently squeeze them together at the top, and you could plait them, twist them. What you want to do is remember you're making two. So what I'm going to do is just give it a little cut in the middle. I'm also going to cut this bit off. I cut that bit off because it didn't really match. I'm just going to check that they're roughly about the same size. And if they're not, just give them a little bit more of a roll. And I'm really drawn to these being just round. What I'm doing with these little ones is making terrazzo pattern. So I'm just taking tiny little bits from the bit that I cut off before and putting them on top. of a flat piece. You could cut little triangles, or you could also cut round pieces. There is no right and wrong. Sometimes it's just better to play. With those, what you want to do next, once you have layered parts on top, you want to get your rolling pin and roll that. Please bear in mind with your rolling pin, especially if it's wooden, please cover it in baking parchment and a bit of masking tape. This is so the clay doesn't absorb into your rolling pin, and you can still use it for cooking as a result. What I'm going to do is just give these a little bit of a roll. Just a tip as well. So sometimes it's quite tricky to roll clay out quite evenly. So sometimes having little guards either side of your clay when you're rolling out helps it stay that thickness. So this is an old bit of lino cut up, but you could use some cardboard, layers of cardboard stacked, some melt board, anything thick that is consistently the same thickness, and you'd put those either side. So say for example I wanted to roll this piece out and I wanted to make it really flat, what I would do is make it in a ball first, brilliant, and make sure your rolling pin is clean where you're going to roll it. Put those either side of the clay, and then you're going to roll, because your rolling pin falls on those guards. I want it to roll out really evenly, so I'm just going to turn it over and turn it the other way. So it was like that before, and I've just turned it over and rolled it that way. Perfect. Say for example, if I was going to do the heart, I would just do it by eye. But say if you want a nice, clean, crisp edge, I would recommend using a ruler. If you don't have a ruler, what you could do is also use the side of your guards as well. I have brought forward a needle. You could also use a craft knife as well, but I quite like that you can use a needle to freehand cut things out. So say for example, I'm going to cut this into a love heart. What I'm going to do is pop it into the clay. So I might sketch it out just using the needle first. So I'm just doing a really rough outline of a love heart. As if I make a little bit of a mistake, what I can do is just rub it over. So before I commit to cutting it out, I'm almost just sketching. If you want it to be very, very even, I would highly recommend making yourself some paper templates too. So I have roughly drawn a love heart on there. And what I'm going to do to cut it out, use my needle. My needle is going to be kept standing tall at all times, so it's going to be kept straight. If you cut on an angle, so say if you drag it round on an angle, it will cut angled. So you want to keep it as standing tall as possible whilst you cut it. So what I'm going to do, pop it in the clay, and I'm going to drag it around the outline in one cut. So dragging, and what you get is a little bit of that off of the clay. Just going to peel this off. This just needs a little bit more cutting around here. Slightly wonky, which is absolutely fine. So what you're going to do is just mould it using your hands and taking all those little bobbly bits off too. All those scrap bits, keep them, because what you can just do is re-knead it, and then that can be your other love hat for the other side. There is absolutely no waste with this. What I'm going to do is pop that one on top of the other one and use that as my guide to cut round. So just marking it out first by doing a scratch on the surface. I would recommend to keep on playing until you've got some really lovely designs that you're happy with. Once you feel like you've done a lot of playing, it would be really good for you to refer back to your plan as well and see if you can start realising some of those. So for example, with that patchwork design that I thought about, it could be using all the leftovers and cutting them into squares. With that one, it could be rolling a disc and cutting it out using the pin. With this one, as I've done there, just making little shapes and putting them in the clay and rolling them out. The more you play, the more you'll be able to translate that playing into making your designs. Please give yourself permission to play, because actually that is where most of the fun is. What I've done here, I've rolled out a little piece, and I've also gone into the garden and got myself some really beautiful textured leaves. And what I'm going to do with those is roll them into the clay. So make sure it's flat. Put down the really textured side and use my rolling pin to gently roll it in. When you play, you discover, and that's where you start coming up with some really exciting things. I love the texture on there. And it's the same, you could do it with leaves, you could do it with shells, any little objects that you find around the house. I think this would be really, really beautiful to push into. I have got some string and yarn. I'm not quite sure what is going to happen, but let's just see. Got some thread. I'm going to lay those on top. And then use the rolling pin to roll them in. That's left some really subtle lines in, but also the yarn has also left quite a lot of loose dust, which we'll have to get rid of. I think the main thing to mention as well, when you are pushing things into the clay, you don't want to push it in too far. So for example, there's a line going across there, which is a weakness in the clay. So if it's going to break, it's going to break there. To make them into jewellery, you'll also need to make some holes in the clay, close to the edge of the piece, but not too close, so you can get the loop in. I would use a toothpick or some kind of paper clip opened up. And think about how they're going to hang as well. So on this one, I want them to hang on the point, so I'm going to put it there. And you want it to go all the way through to the back. But instead of pushing it all the way through, what I'm going to do is come at it from the back as well. So I've made a small hole on the front and then the back. You will notice as you make the holes that as you push from one side, you'll get a risen bump at the back. To eliminate that, that's where you go in from the back as well. You can also just little pat down with your finger, also helps. So we have dangling earrings and jump rings to make tiered earrings. So they will be hanging earrings. So do bear that in mind when you're putting your holes in. So for example, if they are tiered, then you will need to put another hole at the bottom to attach the jump rings. So that one would be where the top ring would go through. So I'll show you, it goes that, that, and another jump ring at the bottom, and then that at the bottom. So I would need to put another hole towards the bottom of the piece here, and then just check the back to make sure the hole's gone all the way through. So, and then because this is a thick one, I'm going to look for the thinnest part that I joined it, and another way to make a really strong closure, instead of putting a hole in, you can bake the earring with your jewellery piece attached. So all I've done, I've pushed that in very slightly, and I'm going to make a little bit of support for it at the back. So a thin layer of clay on the top. So and you would turn it facing the direction that you'd want to have it on. Once you have all the holes, and if you're doing it this way, the attachments of the jewellery on, then what you'd like to do is transfer it to a baking tray. Please do think of them as a pair as well, so when you're working on them, try and think of how they're going to hang in your ears as a pair. So when you are ready to bake them, preheat your oven to 110 Celsius and gently place your mix onto a sheet of baking parchment on a baking tray. I would like you to bake them for 30 minutes. So for those that are keeping those bits of metal on, make sure that you can bake them flat. So I'm going to turn it over and have the metal facing upwards. Do make sure as well that they are spaced apart. For those of you who have any sort of dust or anything on them that you don't want on them, so fingerprints, I would clean them up before you bake them. Please remember that you can also make little beads, you can get some studs in addition to your hanging earrings. You can make necklaces, you can sculpt this into making little jewellery balls. The kind of possibilities are pretty endless. Before you put them in, do make sure that your holes are all in every piece and that the hole goes through right to the other side. And as I mentioned before, you would like to bake them for 30 minutes at 110 Celsius. a little tip as well, do put some tin foil on top of your jewellery, as it helps them not burn in places. In terms of cleaning up, I think it's really helpful to keep your packages and turn them back into bowls and keep the colours together in your packs. And what you want to do is keep them airtight, because actually you can use them again. So if you have any cling film, if you have a little sandwich bag that you can pop them in, wrap them up so they are completely sealed. It is also the same if you have pieces that you want to work on it later. So say if you have had enough for the day, but you know that you want to continue with them tomorrow, what I would do is take that little piece that you're working on and also keep that airtight. Just to bear in mind as well, so most of the instructions will have the temperature that you bake them on. It can change depending on what kind of polymer clay you're using, so do make sure that you read the instructions as well, which are often on the back too. Please make sure that you're going to wash your hands as well, and try and get all the clay out from behind your nails too. You can keep the same tools for using them next time. Just make sure that you clean them all off before you put them away. If any of the surfaces need smoothing, then what I would also recommend is getting some acetone and a cotton swab, just to smooth off that surface that you didn't manage to smooth before baking. So after baking, if any of your sides are sharp, what I would recommend doing is giving them a file. If you have a nail file, that would be sufficient, any sandpaper, just to get rid of those rough edges. Because they are plastic, you don't need to varnish them in any way or seal them. Some common problems, so say for example they're brown in any places, that just means that or if it's discoloured, that you've over baked them and that your oven is a little bit too high. And what I would recommend if that happens is just next time put some tin foil on the top of them to stop them from browning. If any of your earrings are brittle and keep breaking, it could be the quality of the clay, or it could also be that you are under baking them, so you're not baking them for long enough. With heavy use, the clay is likely to snap or chip, but it just means the longer you bake them, so fully baking them and the time that they recommend on the instructions, so in this case 110 degrees at 30 minutes, the clay will be stronger and more durable.
Now that we've finished making the clay beads, all we need to do is attach them to the jewellery fastenings provided in your packs. Using the jewellery pliers, twist the jump ring to open it, making sure it's open nice and wide. Like this. Then what you're going to do is you're going to thread your bead and your earring hook on, and then close again using the same twisting motion. Repeat these steps and you'll have your finished polymer clay earrings. Thank you for watching.